name is Alain or Alan Impellizzeri. There's a confusion because my first name is French and my second name is Italian. I was born in Brussels, but my folks are from Italy originally. And to be complicated, my mother is from Spain, so I'm a European, a citizen of the world, but I'm a Stoic for a few minutes. So I stepped in to give this talk because the gentleman that was supposed to give it had some illness in his family and he couldn't make it today. And so it is a subject that we often talk about, I have to say, in our classes, dialogues, and it's a question that comes up very often. So I'm not so surprised that there's quite a few people this afternoon trying to unravel together, and I'm going to underline this twice, together, the concept of suffering. Serenity will come naturally if we understand and unravel the concept of suffering. The basis for the talk is obviously the one that talk about this in a very well-articulated manner are the Buddhists and in Buddhist philosophy. But if I talk about Buddhist philosophy, I'll spend the whole evening just talking about Buddhist philosophy, which I can, but then we talk a little about suffering. Simply to say that, in Buddhism there are many different schools, but the foundation of Buddhism are based on the concept of the Four Noble Truths, which I'm going to use quite a bit, and the Eightfold Path, which that helps the individual towards liberation. Now, we can talk about that, and we do in the foundation course in the Philosophy for Living. There is a class in Buddhism, and we discuss this in more detail because it requires that. But there are also many different schools: Hinayana, Mahayana, Zen, Tibetan, which is Vajrayana. There are various schools, all of which the foundations of the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path remains the same. The famous middle way. Today, because these ideas are now everywhere plastered on the net, people have an idea of what these key tenets of Buddhism. And if need be, I'll explain them as we're talking about specifically suffering. Suffering or pain. Pain and suffering are the key. And it's funny because often when I talk about this in Buddhism in class, people ask me, are the Buddhists pessimistic? And I said, no, they are very optimistic. But there's one thing about them which is interesting, which is great to acknowledge. They have a great sense of accepting reality. Like the Stoic in the Western world. The problem we have today is that we avoid reality. And more we avoid reality, more we suffer, it seems. And so this avoidance of reality, the first thing we need to understand is to accept our own reality as human beings. And accepting it allows us to overcome it. Without acceptance, no overcoming. The Buddhists say something that is fascinating for me. They say that with acceptance leads to happiness. And people are there, what? But yes, because accepting allows us to embrace what we are experiencing, number one. If I accept my reality, and this is not an intellectual exercise. Because people tell me, I know many things. But acceptance is with this, not with this. Acceptance requires heart. If I accept with this and I understand, I have a chance to overcome. If I only emotively accept it, it's not enough. If I only intellectualize it, it's not enough. Apparently, we need to combine both. So it's a fun way to start this talk, but I just wanted to use this afternoon to hopefully engage in a dialogue and then talk a little bit more about the origin of suffering. How can we become aware of our suffering? What do we need to do to overcome it? And not that I know fully what that means yet, but at least we can share with each other key ideas, practices, attitude that we need to have to overcome suffering, because suffering is part of life. Can we agree on that suffering is part of life? Yeah. If we accept that, that's it, we can go for a break. No. What interests me in this is not simply that we define suffering, which we are going to do that to a point, is how we are facing our sufferings. Each of us. How do we do that? Because, I've seen people come out. Oh, no. It's for circulation. No, it's the ghost in the school. It's more how we face our suffering, because two persons in front of the same problem react very differently. So that suggests to me that suffering is not external but internal. And we can observe that easily with ourselves, depending on our state of mind, how we face the difficulties of life and that what it brings with it, it's very different. So that is the first exercise that we can perhaps understand, is that there's a phrase that the Buddhists use a lot. They say pain as a vehicle of consciousness. Or pain is, or suffering is a vehicle, it's what brings consciousness. A bit of a holy macaroni. So to gain in awareness, I have to suffer. If it seems there is something to it, or at least our sufferings and humanity's sufferings can be a source of gaining in awareness and consciousness and elevation. And I'm going to explain the word elevation later, but because otherwise, what for? Why do we need to suffer for? If there is a purpose, if there is no purpose to suffer. You understand? Yeah. So, questions for you. What is the meaning of suffering from your point of view? Why do we suffer? From your point of view. It doesn't have to be Buddhist or anything, just yours. As they say in Dublin, James. Yes.
According to me, it's just find ourselves. Sometimes.
So suffering helps us to find ourselves.
Sometimes, yes.
Okay.
But as you said, it depends how you react if something happens. Because it's not easy to find yourself.
Yes, finding ourselves is an exercise. It's a lifetime exercise. Not yet. It's a lifetime exercise. It's never finished, because we're not a finished product either, if I can use that terminology. We're not finished. Some people say sometimes, this is the way I am, accepting. Today you are like this way, but not forever. Because that's limiting ourselves tremendously when we say that's the way I am. Take it or lump it. It's a form of escaping a bit, but all right. Somebody else.
Can I comment on her comments? And
Sure.
say, instead of finding, like building.
Building yourself. No, that's fine. By building ourselves.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is it like an evolution? The self-evolution thing? Like a
Brings evolution, that's what you mean?
evolution to the self, and thing like you understand why you're going through suffering, because you have to learn something to overcome it.
Okay. Yes?
To make you value more for your happiness.
I didn't hear the first part of what you said.
Like to value more about your happiness.
To value more your happiness, that's what you said?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's also to bring like duality to life. It's either no, it's not all suffering. It's like as you said, it's to understand both.
So to understand the duality, or yin yang as in China.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to say okay to everything. Just kidding. Anything else?
Self-preservation, you put your hand in the fire and it hurts and you don't really.
Definitely. Self-preservation. Yes. It's a natural mechanism in nature to tell us, whoops, we're going in the wrong direction. So you put your hand on something that's very hot. Okay. Life has, the Buddhists use an example, life says, walls are a bit elastic. When you go to the extreme, bam! Okay, wake up, you're going to the extreme. Something is going to happen. Some people say, oh, okay, they continue. Suffer even further, but that's a different story. Self-preservation, yes, it's a mechanism in nature. Okay. What else?
I think awareness of like vitality, awareness of like the self, but also vitality.
Okay. Okay. Yes?
As a purpose, I think it provides a certain sense of without the pain, you don't really know joy.
Ah, yes. It seems that pain and joy are two brothers and sisters. They work together. Okay. Fair enough.
Maybe part of suffering may come from our frustration that we don't achieve what we desire.
Ah, this is very interesting. Frustration, yes.
So it's like a sign that we should prioritize differently, maybe.
Fair enough. I took a definition somewhere. Here. Another definition, which is not in the books. That's one, for instance. Okay? Very good. What else? We're going to have a break quickly, huh?
Let's say, for example, the fact that you experienced before the suffer
Yes.
and know about it, it helps you for the next time to manage it better.
Okay. Okay, that's true. For that, you need to integrate the experience and the learnings. Otherwise, how many times have we stumbled on the same stone? Because we suffer, but we don't integrate the experience. We don't internalize the experience. No? Yes, many times. Never again. Boom. Because it looks slightly different, smells slightly different, is exactly the same. Yeah, we better have a sense of humor about these things. That's true. Okay. What else? Yes?
I think suffering is like a part of ignorance.
Ignorance. Yes, to be sure. Ignorance is very much what the Buddhists say. Ignorance. Okay? So ignorance for the Buddhists is not like what it means in Dublin. Huh? Ignorance means that we do not know. And it's normal that when we do not know, we make mistakes and therefore suffer. Yes. That's what they mean by ignorance, not being ignorant, which in English has a different connotation. Okay. Anything else? Okay, so most of you have talked about what you think suffering is. How do you think we generally react to suffering? While you're thinking, I'm going to read something I use in class sometimes. So Buddha, you know what it means, Buddha? The enlightened one?
Yeah.
The one who is realized or enlightened? Yes. Okay. Enlightenment is related to consciousness. Some people sometimes define it as universal consciousness. Okay. But I'll get to that, I'll use it later. So, in the definition I took from one of the things I used before is that it says Buddhism goes back to the root cause of suffering. So their objective is, I need to go to the cause, not simply what it shows on the outside, the root cause of suffering. And they say this, suffering is a state of deep dissatisfaction that is associated with physical pain, but is above all an experience of the mind. That's why we react differently in the face of the same thing. Physical, and I'm going to add physical, emotional, and mental pain, because, well, suffering arises when the self we cherish, i.e. the ego in English, is threatened or does not get what it wants, which is what you said. This sense of autonomous self usually causes a rift between myself and others. So what I want is not what the others want, that creates confrontation with the world. Okay? This alternation of attraction and repulsion, I don't like, gives rise to a myriad of disturbing thoughts and emotions, which are translated into words and deeds and build up our suffering. I'm going to give you a very simplistic example, and I'm sure everybody has experienced. You go to work and then somebody tells you something not particularly pleasant. Happens, no? Happens. Well, they call it that's karma, action reaction. You don't know why, but that happened to you. Fair enough. But then throughout the day, we go from colleague to colleague. Wait till I tell you so and so told me this. And all day we are repeating and repeating and repeating and repeating. That's unnecessary suffering. Because we are generating, a philosopher called it karma by stupidity, because we are regenerating the same thing. Some people do that for years, if not decades. And sometimes from generation to generation. My grandmother from a small Spanish village, the village still, 2024, still split in between two sides of the village. Those who are on one side of the civil war and those on the other side. And this is 2024. I give you a different example. I can give you an Irish one if you like. So we carry the same things over and over and over and over and over. But it starts every day. Every day sometimes we say, poor me, poor me, poor me, poor me, poor me. Have you ever noticed that? Me afflicted by. So we're afflicted by something, that's fine, that's karma. Let's find out why and resolve it, if we can. But we generate an awful lot of negative consequences by ourselves and for ourselves. Do you understand that example? And you can expand it a lot. At a mental level is excess judgmental. We judge the world to justify our own suffering. Do you understand that? Anyway, just wanted to say that. How do we react, based on the definition, how do we react to suffering? I don't need specific details, but more you can make it generic if you like. Hello? Too little, too late. No, I'm just kidding. Yes?
Some people wallow in it.
Wallowing, yeah?
And some people rise above
Okay.
and then it depends.
Okay.
It's a journey.
And in your opinion, why people wallow in it or overcome it? What makes someone decide to overcome a suffering? I can ask differently. What does it take to overcome suffering, in your opinion?
I think it's that level of consciousness, like the take responsibility of
Okay.
the situation.
Take responsibility, yes. An element of awareness for sure. Okay. What else?
Maybe the unconsciousness becomes conscious and to actually overcome it. So they're suffering because they're not consciously aware of their perhaps contribution to the matter.
Sure.
So they need to actually rise above it and actually have that conscious awareness to actually overcome.
Fair enough. Can I do a little exercise, a little example perhaps to illustrate? Most of you are aware that we have an ecological problem today, right? Yes? Does that mean that we all behave ecologically? No. So, why am I saying this? I'm not insulting you, please don't feel insulted. No, not at all. It's just that being aware of something doesn't mean change. So, from becoming aware of something else has to happen. We have to mobilize something in us, I'm going to call courage for the moment, or will, and mobilizing something inside ourselves. The Stoic would call it virtue, which is your innermost qualities to decide to overcome. The first virtue they often refer to is courage. Because you need to mobilize your courage to say, I'm going to do something about it, and it is going to require an effort. And even still, may attract a certain level of pain in relation to my desires. Generally, desire of resting at any price or comfort, because it's going to create some disturbance. Do you understand what I mean by this? So, the ecological example is very clear. Everybody knows that we have to consume less. Everybody knows this. Does that mean we do consume less? I don't know. So, To consume less, we have to decide to change our way of life, which is an effort. We have to let go of a lot of things to allow ourselves to possibly have a different future in terms of how the planet is going to survive for us, for our kids and grandkids, and blah, blah, blah. So I'm taking that as an example because that's a collective suffering, perhaps. The Buddhists call that collective karma. We are generating it. So what I want to bring to your attention is, just knowing something and in being aware of it, it's not enough. Something has to happen after that. Okay? Super. Anything else?
Yeah, I was just thinking in terms of what you were saying, I think the suffering needs to be at an individual level of uncomfortableness that makes you want to change.
Yes. Do we live in a world where we are invited to overcome our comfort zones? No. Not really. On the contrary, we're invited to go more and more to a comfort zone because we're better consumers there. I'm not trying to politicize anything here, just that's the reality of what Plato calls the cave. So we have to be even more determined to overcome than ever. Do you understand what I mean by this? That's why I'm highlighting it, because you're right. Awareness and consciousness are essential. That's why suffering is a vehicle of consciousness, but consciousness alone, as the awareness, as we call it in English, something else has to happen. And I just want to bring that to your attention. Okay. Anything else on how do you react to suffering?
The pandemic could be collective karma.
Say again?
The pandemic could be the collective karma.
Yes. Yes, I mean, the pandemic was, I think personally, the collective karma. But the pandemic brought the best in people and the worst in people. I don't know if you ever noticed. The best in people because I've seen people doing things that are absolutely heroic, but also not so heroic. Let's put it that way. So, in the face of difficulty, we have an intimate element in us that allows us to overcome. So the pandemic as such brought about certain things, but also something that we don't want to see. And what's unfortunate perhaps that some learnings of the pandemic we have already forgotten. We've gone back to our self-centered way, to put it politely. But intellectually we all understand the necessity of solidarity, for instance. But now we have to continue to understand that in a practical manner. Otherwise, there are other forms of suffering that are generated. Does that make sense? I'm taking examples of what we've experienced in the pandemic. Thank you. It's a very good example. Anything else?
If someone has a goal, some kind of rewarding situation ahead of them, it's kind of motivating to put effort into overcoming something.
Bless the phone. Is it still in one piece? Just about. Okay, so I go my notes. Here. So I'm going to give a few things and then we're going to take a break. So as you can see, I just kind of do this in a form of dialogue. It's more interesting for all of you, so you can also participate. And I'm going to give you a few keys that can help us in this subject. I'm not going to exhaust it today by any means, but just as a means to kind of create a certain introspection and reflection that may generate an action or actions plural. So, philosophically, we can say that suffering can bring about the possibility of gaining consciousness, and I think quite a lot of you have said that. So suffering is often linked to loss, whatever type of loss, or a sentiment or feeling that we're losing something real. And so suffering can express itself in multiple ways. But loss, and trying to regain that loss is also what we're seeking. So the Buddhists when they talk about suffering, is that they always come to the conclusion that we have lost something. But not something physical, huh? It can be physical or emotional, mental. So trying to see what I'm saying at different levels, not just physical. The physical one is the most obvious one because we can sense it immediately. Okay? So I got up this morning for the last few days with a back pain, and it's there, less the back pain, and you learn to manage it. But you cannot, suffering should not stop us to do what we need to do, or what we decided to do, at least to a point. With intelligence. Intelligence is always a key factor. So Buddhists, in their teachings, signal that to liberate ourselves, enlightenment, liberating ourselves, goes through four noble truths, which I'm going to mention them, and because they're all related to suffering, they're helpful to understand. The first one, they talk about the origin of suffering, which is change, impermanence, are the origin of the suffering in life. And you've all mentioned it, so I'm not going to talk too much about it, a little bit, but somehow. The cause of suffering, that's the second noble truth. The cessation of suffering, third noble truth. And then the fourth one is, how do I get there? How do I get from where I am today? So which is the path that leads to the cessation of suffering. The famous Eightfold Path, which is ethical largely in nature. We won't have time to talk about the Eightfold Path in details today, it's impossible. But I encourage you to read because there's loads on it. But often what I've seen online, because curiosity kills the cat, I went online, what do they say these days? Sometimes it's a bit synthetic, a bit superficial. There are better sources than what I've seen online. But anyway. So I'm going to start with the existence of suffering. Or they call it dukkha, D-U-K-K-A. And really, they say suffering comes from the impermanence felt by the ego. Okay? Things are impermanent. They are in constant change. And we have difficulty to deal with change. Have you ever noticed that? Any form of change is difficult. So we're trying to escape the fear or the suffering of change by distracting ourselves. Do you understand? So that's why we're always distracted, be by the technology or otherwise. So we're trying to forget our condition, says the Buddhist. And today, even perhaps more than ever, in my experience. So excessive thought is because of the insatisfaction of what life is bringing to us. So we're just going on a spin, mentally and emotionally. So we are battling to go back to pleasure at any price. Do you understand that? So that's why most of the techniques of Eastern and Western tradition, because in the West as well, they have those techniques, we need to refine our balance, or center, or place of balance inside us. The Stoics call that ataraxia, which is this element of permanent inner stability. The stability is not static, it's in constant movement. This is also known in Eastern tradition as concentration, to be in one's own center, which we can find and connect with through reflection, introspection. Sometimes people call meditation. This would be a lecture in itself to talk about meditation. People use the word meditation for anything that moves, but it's not all meditation. Okay? Most of it is calming the mind, which is okay, it's a good exercise, but calming the mind is not meditation. Meditation requires to reflect on something, not on nothing. You have to reflect on the origin of suffering to overcome it. That's meditation. Or I prefer to call it introspection, reflection. Do you understand? You can't just go and control and delete the mind. Okay, I feel better. No, we don't control and delete the mind. We need to center ourselves so that we can focus on reflecting on why and what for. Not what or how, but why and what for. So we gain clarity of the why, then we can maybe find a way to overcome. Otherwise, it's very difficult. Do you understand? So briefly, suffering for the body is often referred to the loss of health, physical pain, as we commonly call it, unbalance, which will naturally appear as you get older. I can guarantee you that. And you get older, even when you get up in the morning, you feel your bones and so on, you say, well, at least I'm alive. Today I don't feel anything, but yeah, maybe not. I'm joking a little bit. So sometimes suffering is a welcome situation at a certain age. Ah, I'm still alive. Anyway, I'm joking. Suffering at a psychological level is when we start, they call it the loss of sentiment. Not emotions, sentiment. Sentiment is a deeper emotion and longer lasting emotion. Either we start not feeling so much, becoming more indifferent, and also we feel that there's less and less sentiments towards us. So we suffer for the lack of sentiments towards us and our inability to express our sentiments to others. Also, the loss of things we love. The loss of people we love also engender psychological suffering. We're afraid not to be loved anymore and not to be able to love anymore. Do you understand? It's quite powerful what I just said. It's not. And with age, if you don't pay attention, we kind of go in a box where I feel neutral. Be careful, because that's not what they're talking about. We need to learn to express our deepest and most beautiful sentiments and to accept the beautiful sentiments of others, but we tend to want them in a certain way and be prescriptive about them instead of being open-hearted, to have an open heart, to be expanded to, I don't know, just a sunrise can be a great, beautiful sentiment. Nobody has to give it to you. You don't have to beg for sentiments. Life brings you sentiments, and the most beautiful ones, and they are usually related to harmony and beauty. Mental suffering can come, emotional suffering can also come with loss of confidence in yourself, loss of confidence in the things you do, loss of confidence in the project you've chosen for your life. Project or projects for your life. The loss of hope can create suffering. And ultimately is we start trusting ourselves and having confidence in ourselves. Some people say, but we don't have a lot of confidence to start with. I know that. Because one of the key objectives to philosophize is to gain confidence in you. Because we're trying to answer the question, know yourself and you will know the universe and its law. This is an intimate understanding of who you are that will give you confidence. We need, as people, to regain our confidence so that we can choose what we want to do with our life. Therefore, suffer less. Do you understand? Mentally, suffering comes when we are unable to understand, incomprehension. We can't understand what's going on. And what happens is that the mind closes, clack. It's like talking to a wall. Have you ever had that experience that you talk to somebody and finito? And you can see they're suffering, they're trying to understand, but they're completely closed off. Happens to us as well. Somebody's explaining something to us and everything's closed. And we are suffering. Yes? We're blocked. We don't understand what's going on. We don't understand the meaning of what's going on. Ask an elderly person, when now they can't go to a post office to get their pension, they have to go and have a smartphone and have an app and so on. Because they don't understand what's happening. That's a lack of solidarity from the younger generation, by the way. I'm just saying that passing by, but no, it's more effective, cost less, who cares about a whole generation of people? I don't know. I'm saying these things because we don't even notice it anymore. And taking that as an example, there are loads more. We need to be a little more inclusive and see. So the mind suffers when it's too narrow, loses its ability to understand the reasons of why they do what they do and the reasons of their life. We suffer because we can't get to the essence of things, to the why of things, to the layers that life has brought, and we have to go inside and find what's what in there. We suffer. We also suffer of our self-image. Because our image is the projection of what other people think we should do or be or project. And we suffer from that instead of being ourselves. Do you understand? And that can create a lot of mental suffering. The Buddhists would say that it is most likely that we will never stop suffering. But we can suffer less, much less. For the Buddhist, overcoming suffering is the subject of overcoming suffering is closely linked with the concept of liberation or enlightenment. So it is spiritual in nature, nothing to do with spirituality in a religious sense, but in a philosophical sense. They say we need to gain a perspective from life. They say all of us have an element which I would call intelligence that is capable of differentiating what's what, and that's consciousness. To differentiating what's the world, how the world works, how we work, and at the same time getting distance from it. So the Roman would call it the ability to gain mind over matter. From that point of view, we can see things from a different perspective. But if I'm totally, in my suffering, I cannot see anything, I cannot differentiate anything, I certainly cannot differentiate anything. So they're suggesting that we need to liberate ourselves from the attachment we have to our own sufferings. Do you understand? Because eventually we identify to our sufferings. They say, me and my suffering equal the same. But no, it's not the same. Okay? Most of our suffering comes from within. So what they suggest is, first and foremost, what's the cause of my suffering? Number one. What's the cause? What's causing that suffering? It is impossible to get to the cessation of pain if I don't understand what's the cause, what's the origin. So the first question to ask is why? It's very philosophical. Why? Once we have understood and accepted the cause of suffering, second, we have to look for, and that requires quite a bit of work, to solutions to resolve the cause of that suffering. Without the will to find out, to search, to investigate, and to apply solutions, suffering will persist, they say. Yeah. And when the suffering persists, what do? We accuse the world of our suffering. Because most of our suffering, as you understand, comes from within. But when we don't find solution, we're going to blame somebody. Someone. My education, my parents, the churches, the state, somebody, but not me. In effect, we haven't found a solution. And also because we cannot resolve everybody else's problems, we can resolve how we are engaging with those difficulties. Even in the face of the most difficult thing that we have to face. Suffering itself doesn't go away. What we can do is to gain distance from it and be less affected by it. Do you understand that? What we're hoping is that the suffering, because we accuse the outside world to be the origin of my suffering, that they will change their behavior or what they do so that I stop suffering. Do we have any control of that? Well, no. But I can gain perspective to what's happening to me. Do you understand? So, this is why they say suffering is the vehicle of consciousness, because our experiences suddenly are transformed into enriching learning experiences. Because why are we challenged by life? For the sake of it? To annoy us? In a completely different text in the Bhagavad Gita, which some of you have studied already, I think. In the Bhagavad Gita, they suggest that all the challenges that life brings to us is an opportunity to learn. You can look at it two ways. Either you can say life is a pain, and at the top, otherwise it becomes difficult to talk about it. And we say accuse the outside world, or we say, okay, challenge. Okay, pain, what are you trying to tell me? What is that I need to overcome? What are the qualities inside me I need to develop? What are the things that I need to mobilize in me to face that you're bringing to me? And for me, it's a fascinating different way to look at the same problem. Because life talks to us. And so, if I'm Socratic for a second, Socrates say, engage in a dialogue with your difficulties. And if we engage in a dialogue with our difficulties are going to give us clues. What do I need to overcome? What qualities do I need? In Greek, they call it arete, strength. What strength do I need to develop to face that I've discovered? Suddenly you're regaining possession, you're regaining control to an extent. We never control everything. Anyway. Regain some level of control or mastership of ourselves. Plato would say we start now riding our horse and not be ridden by the horse. In Eastern tradition, they talk about a carriage, that we are able to regain the hold of that carriage. Okay, well, the horse is still a bit wild, but now you've regained some control of it. Do you understand the difference? But for that, I need to develop something. What is it? So I'm going to conclude before the break by saying suffering always comes due to an attachment to what we have. Yes? And it's an incredible question to ask ourselves, the difference between who am I, what I have, or who I am. And it's a very interesting question to ask, to differentiate what I have, it's on the outside. I can have money, I can have a job, I can have title, I can have house. All of these things can go away, but who I am, never. So we need to re-identify ourselves with who we are, and not simply what we have. What we have, I don't know if you noticed, today we have, tomorrow, whatever. But who I am, my character, as in ethical, moral character, that's mine. Because I built it, I developed it, it's mine. And those are helping me to face whatever life brings to me. Do you understand? That brings a fundamental concept, which is a concept of freedom. Then freedom starts. Otherwise, we are enslaved by the events of life. Do you understand this?